How did the Kuomintang justify its authority over Taiwan after 1945, and how do historians view this early period of their rule in Taiwan?
The KMT, of course, will say that it's the one that got the mantle of authority and rule for China. Um, it was free China, after all, until the early 1970s. It had a seat on the UN. It was one of the four great policemen and part of the UN, and given that charter and the mandate, and it was then allowed to retake Taiwan after the Cairo Declaration in 1943, and then the handover in 1945. That handover was a lot more dubious, I think. If we look at recent scholarship by Taiwanese historians like Chan Sui-lian, who in her new book, Taiwanese Political History, really kind of questions how solid KMT rule was over Taiwan in the initial years, and the Americans and the Brits were pretty unhappy with it and kept talking about maybe we should remove it because there's such tremendous corruption. But of course, the KMT then wants to say they came in, um, they help, they recolonize in a sense, they re-Sinicize the Taiwanese to what they're supposed to have been, and that takes years.
Could you tell us what the reaction was of early Taiwanese independence supporters when the KMT took over in 1945, and how did the KMT treat them?
Um, there's, of course, the other issue in Taiwan, which is those who want Taiwan to be independent. And they were there in number in the late years of the Japanese colonial experience, but also in the early years when the KMT came in. That they didn't want the KMT. They already felt that they were different than the Chinese nationalists, and they saw the corruption on the Chinese continent. They want to be independent, and they felt that they had gained that right by having experienced Japanese colonialism, but having advanced nonetheless. And they also have to then be crushed by both the mainland Chinese interpretation of history, but also then the KMT, who cannot tolerate. It's not a multi-party universe; it's a one-party system.
Now, you've written extensively about how Japan framed its empire in the early 21st century. But I wonder, could you tell me what narratives circulate in Japan about this 50-year period of colonial rule over Taiwan?
There is a relatively commanding presence of conservative opinion in Japan that looks at the Taiwanese colonial experience as having trained and fed enough advancement to the Taiwanese so that they would become democratic by the 1990s. So that if they hadn't experienced Japanese colonialism, you wouldn't have the strong, robust democratic machinery that you have in Taiwan today. They want to kind of take credit for that. And I think really we kind of see four different interpretations of that evolution and that history that are still in competition, both that are all in competition in Taiwan, but then also regionally as well.